As a photographer, I once turned a $400 fishing boat and a blog post into a $100,000 photography project documenting the Mekong River. I got my first photo published with National Geographic by taking photos of my old summer job. And right now, I'm in the middle of production on the 5th video in a series paid for by one of the biggest telecommunications companies in the country that began with an idea I developed while driving around in my friend's smart car. Some of the most random ideas I've had have turned into some of the most memorable projects of my career. Far more meaningful to me than a lot of the more high-profile projects I might have been involved with. But if you're gonna pull an idea out of thin air and turn it into something real and maybe even get paid for it, you have to work it. You don't have ideas, you grow them. So let's talk about how. Hey guys, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Luke Forsyth, documentary cinematographer and filmmaker. And on this channel, I teach the skills and lessons I've learned over 10 years of working in the documentary industry. Today, I'm gonna share the 3-step system that I use to develop ideas and hopefully turn them into real film projects. If that sounds like something you're into, think about subscribing. There's gonna be a new video like it every week. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I can call myself a full-time documentary filmmaker. I mean, I definitely earn 100% of my income from the documentary industry, but it's not like I'm running around shooting personal projects every day of my life. Most of the time, I work as a cinematographer on big budget doc shoots for production companies or TV channels. But sometimes, every so often, I'll come up with an idea that I just can't stop thinking about. And when that happens, there are a few tips and tricks I've learned that help turn an idea into something real. Have you ever been in the shower or going for a walk or stuck in traffic when an idea pops into your head and you think, hey, that would make for a really good documentary or podcast or book or whatever? Odds are you might be right. Those could be really great stories. The problem is, no matter how hard I try to convince myself that I'll never forget my latest and greatest idea, most of the time I've forgotten it within an hour, if not sooner. I mean, I've heard some people say that if you forget an idea, then it can't have been that great of an idea in the first place, but I don't buy that. I approach ideas the same way I'd approach a doc shoot. When I shoot a documentary for Netflix or whoever, they don't want me to decide the story for them by turning off the camera every time something happens that doesn't fit with their script. No, they want me to shoot the hell out of the story, and then they'll decide later what they want to use. For me, ideas are the same. Let's decide later what we want to use and what we want to throw away, not limit our options from the start. And this is my first tip for turning ideas into paying documentary projects. Capture those ideas as soon as they come to you. Over the years, I've changed up the apps and materials that I use to capture ideas, but what never changes is that at the heart of my system is some sort of quick capture tool. It could be a notebook or an index card or some slick app with a cool interface, but all it really has to do is allow you to get an idea from your brain to something permanent as quickly as possible. At the moment, I currently use Apple Notes for this, mostly because it's easy and it's always there. If an idea hits me while I'm walking, I'll just pull out my phone and make a new note with a title that sums up the idea. Most of the time, that's it. I put my phone away and then go back to what I was doing. If I'm really inspired by something, I might write a few lines about its basic structure or something like that, but I don't do anything complicated at this stage. It's really just about getting that idea down before it disappears forever. I like to think of this as my garbage pit of ideas, and I try to never curate what goes in there. If something seems like a good idea in the moment, it goes in the pit, regardless of whether or not I ever do anything with it. These ideas can come from anywhere. They can come from places like books or podcasts or magazines. They can also come from the news, but they can also come from unexpected places. The idea I had for the project I'm currently working on was while watching footage of the JFK assassination, so you just never know. Once your garbage pit starts to fill up, I sometimes find that there'll be 1 or 2 ideas in there that stick with me and pop up in my brain while I do unrelated things like brush my teeth or put on my socks or whatever. And no matter how much I ignore the idea, it just won't go away. But once you settle an idea, how do you start thinking about expanding it into something bigger? At the beginning of the lockdowns, I threw an idea into the garbage pit that just said, a cinematic time capsule of this crazy time. There was no idea beyond that, and as best as I can remember, I made it while coming back from a trip in my friend's smart car. I didn't do anything with it after that. I just wrote it down and left it. A month or so later, I was watching the Ken Burns doc about the Vietnam War. I think it's just called the Vietnam War. And there was a scene in it where they were talking about the assassination of JFK, like I mentioned. But for some reason, I noticed that the stock footage they were using of 1960s America was actually really terribly shot. I mean, the framing was bad, the angles were bad, it was just bad footage. But because it was from such a different time, it was still fascinating and I loved watching it. From there, I started wondering how people in the future would look back on this moment in history and our footage of a really crazy time. And then I remembered the cinematic time capsule note in my garbage pit. So I opened it up and started started expanding on the idea, and I thought, why shouldn't I be the one to make the time capsule for future generations? I mean, I had all the gear and no work, and the most significant moment of my generation was taking place all around me. Deciding that you want to take an idea and turn it into something takes us to the next step of the process, which is defining what that idea actually is. I mean, do you have an idea that will appeal to big TV networks, or is it really fringe? What will it look like stylistically? Do you need an hour to tell this story, or can you do it in 5 minutes? Do you even have a story, or do you just have a topic? Before you can make it interesting for other people to watch, you have to know what you want to make. I've learned the hard way that just grabbing a camera and starting to film with no plan almost never works. With still life, which is what the lockdown piece was eventually called, I realized that I didn't really have a story, and I wasn't really interested in making one. I just wanted to record a very specific and unusual moment in history, not investigate its causes or follow a character's journey through it. So it wasn't really a documentary, more of an art project. For something like that, I didn't need an hour and a half to say what I wanted to say. I thought I could do it in about 10 minutes. From there, I worked with a friend to make a list of locations that might be visually interesting. I got in touch with a musician about some ambient background music and found a few visual references online that I liked stylistically. Now, it might not seem like much, but knowing that you want to make a 10-minute art film with ambient music and having a list of 20 locations to shoot in is much more actionable than just some vague idea. Even if you think you see the final product in your own head, you should still take the time to define on paper, what you think you're actually going to make so that you know where to start and you can see where the weak points are. And that's the second stage. Define the idea. Sit down and make time to think about what you're trying to say and how you want to say it. Do this and it will help you a ton as you get the idea out there and into the real world. But once you've defined it, what exactly are your options? With this project, I never really had commercial aspirations, and I was pretty sure it wasn't a good fit for media or news outlets, so I never actually tried very hard to sell it. When it was done, I just uploaded it to Vimeo and waited to see how people would react. It didn't go crazy viral or get a staff pick or something like that, and if I'm being honest, it wasn't all that widely watched. I think we had about 1,500 views at most, but one of those views was from someone who mattered, who worked at that big telecom company that I mentioned, and the company had a lot of money set aside to support the arts. She loved it, and she showed it to her boss, who also loved it. They ordered 3 more episodes on the spot and gave us a $20,000 budget. A year later, I went back to the same people and proposed a 5th and final installment of this series now that COVID is winding down, and they gave us even more funding. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty tiny budget. No one's getting rich from that, and after the hard cost of production and splitting the money up between everyone involved, it really doesn't go very far. But the point here was never to make money. It was just about getting the idea made, and everything else that we've gotten out of it has been a bonus. And that's the third and final thing you need to do with your idea. Distribute it. Notice I don't say sell it, because not all of your films or photo projects need to be motivated by money. Sometimes, like with Still Life, I just wanted to contribute to the public record, and everything else was an extra. So how do you distribute your ideas? Well, there are 3 basic ways. The first one that I find less and less common is to pitch your idea directly to an outlet or a production company and hope that they buy it and give you a budget up front. This is great and obviously creates the least risk for you, but in my experience, this is more common at like really high levels of production where you have a big reputation and a lot of experience. It's pretty hard to get someone to buy an idea that they haven't seen yet if they don't know who you are. One way that you could boost your chances is to shoot a sizzle, which is like a very short 1 to 2 minute trailer for your film. You don't need much to make a sizzle, you just need a little bit of strong footage, so the film doesn't have to be finished, but it does have to show them your idea. So if you can do that, they're much more likely to take a chance on you than if you just described it to them over an email. If you can't find someone to buy it in advance, your next option is to go ahead and make it anyways, just using whatever budget you can afford, and then later you try and sell it. Now obviously this is more risk for you up front, but if you end up making something that people really want, you can end up getting a lot more money than you might have if you just sold the idea at the beginning stages. Now the last option, and the one that's created some of the most interesting opportunities in my career, is to make something and then give it away for free. There's a lot of hostility among creatives and the word free, but sometimes really great things happen when you just put something out there without asking for anything back. I mean, stick it on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever and see if people like it. If they do, it's amazing what can come from them. 10 years ago, I wrote a blog post that got the attention of some bankers in Singapore, and it allowed my friend Gareth and I to spend 2 years documenting the Mekong River. Later, a social media post that I made about my old summer job got me my first photo publication credit with National Geographic, and a weird little idea to make a time capsule of COVID lockdown funds turned into this project that we're still working on a year later. I love paid work, and I am definitely not telling you to go work for free, but sometimes giving your ideas away will give you more back in the long run than just the cash up front. So that's it really. That's how a random thought can turn into a $25,000 film project. Everything starts with an idea, and the freelance filmmaking world is all about turning ideas into real films. Recognizing when you have an idea and getting some sort of system in place to capture and then develop and distribute it was one of the most important steps in pushing my career forward. Thanks for watching that, and I hope it helped. If you liked that video, check out this link to see the original film that got us the grant in the first place. It's really different than my normal documentary work, but I think it turned out to be pretty cool. But let me know if you think differently in the comments. See ya!